Good afternoon. Galaxy Fold is a phone that I did not mention in the slightest in the first video, and that's because it's getting its own. And to do that, we need Java. Overall, you or I have seen a lot of people who are talking about the Galaxy Fold in a very negative way. There's people who say that it's not practical. Other people say that it's useless. And I'm like, so you have, when the iPhone 4 came out, for example, that was about the same size, maybe not quite as narrow as the Fold is when it's folded up. People love that. What light roasts do you have?
We have Miranda, but it's old, so...
Let's do a grande pike roast. Now, I have just the location. And they have, like, the chin and the forehead, I guess, were about the same size as, maybe a little bit smaller, I'll give it that, as the Fold is in its folded state. So if you have a phone that's completely functional and not 7.3 inches big, I think, then I don't see what the big deal is about it being useless. If you're playing a card game, for example, would you rather play it on a screen that's this big, or would you rather be able to, oh, well, I've got a few minutes, I'm waiting for a bus, I'm waiting for a meeting, or on my lunch, instead of going like this, what if you went, and then you have all this to work with? I struggle to see how that's useless. Another big complaint is about the price point. It's, wait, let me make sure I don't get the numbers right, because it's not like an even 2,000, but okay, $1,980. Is this expensive for a phone? Abso-freaking-lutely. Of course. Duh. Like, nobody said it was cheap as far as a cell phone goes. But look at what they did. They've made a material that could flex in the middle thousands of times without breaking, so they say, if their testing has been thorough enough, and I'm assuming that for as long as it's taken them to come out with a product like this, that they have put in the efficient amount of testing for it. I know I would, and especially with a reputation as big as Samsung's, like, I would want to protect that at all costs. And then the hinge, like, same thing as a laptop, only this will be folded and unfolded even more frequently and in a larger number of times than a laptop open and closed will be. Then you take the fact that they put two separate batteries, I should say, one in each half, and then they found a way to link them together while avoiding, you know how if you take a piece of wire and you flex it enough, it's gonna break. But they found a way to put two batteries into a device where it won't break. And it still bends in half. And also, like, the two different displays. People are griping about the removal of the headphone jack, which actually brings me to the next complaint, saying, what does Samsung have to say now, blah, blah, blah. And does it suck that they took it away? Yeah, duh, of course. But they took the headphone jack away, and now you have a phone that folds in half. Whereas when Apple took the headphone jack away, my theory about it is, the reason they took the headphone jack away is because they knew that they needed to get with the times and make a phone that was water resistant, and they, like Samsung's with the S7 came out, that still had a power button and still had a headphone jack, but they're like, gosh, we can't find a way to make a phone that's water resistant and still have a home button without violating patents that have already been in place, whether that be from Samsung or somebody else. I just prefer to think that Samsung has the patent on that, but that's my bias speaking. So then they're like, well, now we took the home button away and replaced it with a touch-sensitive circle that looks just like the home button, but now we need a way, I'm guessing because they wanted to preserve familiarity for iPhone users, they needed to find a way to make it feel like you were still pressing the button without it actually being a button. So what do? They came up with the haptic engine, and what do they have to take out in order to get that to work? They had to take out the headphone jack, which happened to be another hole that water could use to get inside the device. So they kind of killed two birds with one stone, but they still couldn't get it done like Samsung did. I feel like Apple took the headphone jack away because of their own limitations, and maybe for a certain limitation or two, Samsung took it away for the same reason for the Fold, but at the same time, it's like, what did you get in return? When the iPhone 7 came out without a headphone jack, what did you get? You didn't really get anything except water resistance, which has been like a thing for a long time before Apple made the first one that was water resistant. And foldable phones have not really been a thing. Like, the only one that I can think of that came out before the Galaxy Fold was the ZTE Axon M, I think. And even that wasn't a foldable display. It was just a phone that had three separate displays with like a little gap in the middle, you know, just like that, with a hinge. Samsung took it a step further, and I still don't like that it got taken away. But at the same time, it is way easier to justify that removal than it was for some other particular companies that took out the same thing. There was a lot of complaints about the Galaxy Fold only being on stage for, according to, wait, let me look at the name again because I don't want to get it wrong, to Carissa Bell of Mashable. In her article, she said that by her count, it was on stage for approximately 3 minutes and 20 seconds. For a device that they showed off before anything else happened in the keynote, is that kind of a short amount of time for it to be there? Yeah, sure. And a lot of people complained about the fact that the Fold, one person, I can't remember what article it came from, but it described it as blah, 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 until we solve it before it slipped back into DJ Ko's pocket. And that's what it did. And then it was never seen again, not in the flesh at least. And, you know, the whole other lineup of the S10s, even, well, I say that even the 5G. The 5G was available. Based on one of the articles that I read, they said that it was kind of a behind closed doors type thing and nobody was allowed to turn it on. That is harder for me to understand, but that's also not what this video is about, so I'll kind of get back on track. People are mad that a hands-on, touchable, feelable version of it or demo of it wasn't available after the Unpacked event was actually over for the people who had attended it to go and like get their hands on. Interestingly enough, on a little side note, neither was Huawei's foldable phone. They didn't have a handleable version of that either. But that leads a lot of people to ask a bunch of questions about, is it ready? Is it a thing? Blah, blah, blah. You saw the demo. It is a physical, real thing. So in my opinion, the only reason why they would avoid a hands-on version of the Fold being available straight off the bat is because if there's anything that's not ready about it, it's at least a large percentage software instead of hardware. I'm still tripping out about how people say it's useless and like impractical, blah, blah, blah. I don't think so at all. Like, especially once they get all the issues ironed out with, you know, app continuity and the whole like maps here and then fold it open and then blah, blah, blah. It's great. But I see great usability with all of this. And I saw one question about are apps going to be able to continue on the folded out screen as smoothly as they should when it goes from the front one to the folded out version. And number one, 12 gigs of RAM is in this thing. That's the most that Samsung has ever put in a smartphone ever, period. And number two, when developers catch up, and if this catches on to be a thing, that will put even more pressure on developers to be like, oh snap, we gotta make our stuff usable, because if we don't, then people won't use our app and they'll use somebody else's who actually did optimize it for fold out, yada, yada, yada. Google already knows about it. Google's already putting software in place to optimize those things, so I don't think it's gonna be that big of an issue. When a new thing comes out, yeah, it takes some people some time to get on board, but that doesn't make it useless. It doesn't make it impractical. Here's a question. What would be a useful, practical, new step for smartphone features? Like, where would you have taken it? If you don't like the foldable, then what would you do to spice up the whole, you know, slab with a screen on it that has been the standard smartphone form factor for ever? You want to make it into a sphere? No. You want to make it be able to roll up and put in your pocket? I've seen complaints about the lack of an in-display fingerprint scanner for the Fold, but where are you going to put it? If you're going to put one there, you're going to have to put two. And they've already got 2 displays, 6 cameras, and what is it, 4,300 milliamp hours? Let's see. The number 4,300 comes to mind. It's somewhere around there, give or take 100 milliamp hours or so. You're already putting a display on one side and a display on the other. That's sandwiching two, and a battery in between all that, as well as whatever other components that they put in whatever side of the phone that we're talking about, because it's the same on either one. Actually, on one of them, it's just one display, but still, I would like to see you figure out how to put a ultrasonic fingerprint scanner inside the display of something that's what, like that thick, as well as a battery, and another display on the other side. Like, that sounds really freaking hard. And why go to the trouble and the engineering headache to put 2 fingerprint scanners inside the displays for use when it's closed or open, when you could just put one on the side like they did with the S10e. That seems to me to be the best application of that, because that way you can use it whether it's open or closed. You can use the same fingerprint scanner and it's gonna, I mean, we'll see how well that scanner built into the home button works when the 10e launches. And it would make the most sense that they put the same one that they put in the 10e into the Fold. And if the 10e works just fine, then I don't see a problem at all. You're still going to press the home button anyway, and the home button is still very much reachable when you pull any kind of phone out of your pocket. They're designed to be that way. I don't see the issue. Others still faulted for the lack of an SD card slot. And, I mean, is this uncharacteristic for Samsung? Yeah, since 2015 at least. But it comes standard with half a gig of storage. To me, like, wait, no, I'm sorry, half a terabyte. Excuse me. In this case, I don't see the lack of an SD card slot to be that much of an issue when you have half a terabyte of the type of RAM, or memory, excuse me, that has such insanely fast read and write speeds, I don't see the problem either. And again, it may not be practical for everyone, but at least recognize it for what it is. Like, could you figure out how to do what they just did? No. Like, you gotta design the hinge, you gotta design the, I already went through all this. Like, it's amazing that they even did it. So appreciate it for what it is. Like, could you figure out how to make that happen? And then, once you did figure out how to make it happen, how much would you charge for it? I would charge a pretty freaking penny. What would be the ideal price of it for you? Like, how much would you reasonably expect that would cost? Like a reasonable price. Like, people, they say that a $1,200 phone is far too expensive. There's a lot of people that think a $1,000 phone is far too expensive. But again, if you had gone through, I think they've been talking about this for like 10 years, maybe not 10 years, let's say 5. If it took you 5 years from conception to completion to create something like that, how much would you want people to pay for it? Like, that's a lot. I dare say I don't even have the slightest clue how much money this actually cost them in research and development and staffing and payroll and blah, blah, blah. I would assume at least in the 100 millions. At least in the 100 millions. With all the time, well, the people they had to pay, all the engineers that had to like scratch their heads and sit down at the drawing board again and again and again through prototype after prototype after prototype, and finally getting something that's actually handleable and that works. I want to charge a lot of money for it too. I'd be like, this took a long time and a lot of effort. Hand over the cash, like, for real. They said the telephone was impractical and unnecessary and would never get off the ground. They said the automobile was, we don't need that, like, that's a joke. No. They said that the television was also like a dumb idea. Point being, a lot of people think that a lot of the staple pieces of software and hardware that we use today were unnecessary and impractical when they first came out, including smartwatches. And they've exploded. Again, like, there's example after example after example of things that that have been made or created or conceptualized at least, and then made into a reality that a lot of people will just scoff at and dismiss and say, we'll never use that. We don't need that. Until you do. Or until you realize, oh my God, why haven't we, like, how do we do this? How do we go so long without this? Like, the freaking internet. Nobody thought we needed that either. Or there were many, many people that never thought it would go anywhere. And now it's like the centerpiece of what, at least, like, most countries run on. That's a broad statement, but you get what I mean. If you like the way that this whole video was formatted, it was actually inspired by this comment. It really stuck in my head, and I told them, I was like, you know what, that's a really good idea, I'm gonna try it. And so if you like this way, please let me know, because I can do more like this. It might take a little bit longer, but it's more engaging, in my opinion. Looks prettier. Some lovely folks that I feel confident will agree with me are the Scotties on Patreon, the ones that pay $10 or more per month, and those are Stuart Glover. And we have a new one, Derek D. Thank you so much for your support. I sincerely appreciate it. Ian Lewis, Paul A. Donnelly, Teddy the Dog, Mario Torres, Robert Bitter, Jatinder Law, Anthony Jackson, Eric Price, Stephen Nichols, Nick Hawks, Sin O, Unit Omega, and Christopher Caswell.
I stay with my Scotties. My Scotties are my boys. I ride with them. And I put that on the generation.
Also, there are the Super Beamers, the ones that pay $5 a month, and those are Yolanda Cibro Paracord Design, Paradoxed, and Grant Stockton. Last but most certainly not least, we have the Beamers, the ones that pay $1 a month, and those are Josh Utley, Encrypted Bunny, Vincent Papineau, Spidget, Jamie Ives, Rico the 13th, Roman Van Rookhuizen, Nicholas Clark, David Larson, and Elixir. Don't fold under all the negative input that you receive about this masterpiece of engineering, and stay beaming.